Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, May 1st, only on Netflix.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen. You just have to be a true crime enthusiast, and if that's you, welcome home. I am so sorry for leaving you all high and dry last week waiting for a new episode. I came down with a really bad flu, my voice was shot, and I didn't want to record in that state. That being said, as you can hear, my throat still feels a little froggy, so my apologies. Shout out to all my new listeners. I've seen an increase recently, and I think that's because you are all sharing the podcast with your friends and family, and even on social media. I also appreciate all the love on my Apple and Spotify podcast reviews. Those really do help the algorithm and bumps to show up the list. A quick plug for my bonus content. The newest bonus episode that is coming out this week is an Air Force case out of Robbins Air Force Base. It's the case of Amos Wilson. So if you're interested in listening, be sure to check out patreon.com/militarymurder or Apple Premium subscriptions. Okay, today's story should make you sufficiently pissed off because what in the world is wrong with people? That's all I'll say for now. Join me today as I tell you the story that became known as the boy under the billboard and then turned into the investigation into 2 homicides. This is the story of Bobby and Myung Witt. Now, let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
On September 25, 1998, the Orange County PD in North Carolina received a call from a landscaping crew while cutting grass underneath a billboard along Interstate 85 in Mebane, North Carolina. While working, the workers discovered human skeletal remains. Tim Horn, a crime scene investigator with Orange County, was one of the first deputies on the scene, and judging by the clothing and the small stature of the remains, crime scene investigators presumed the remains belonged to a male child. They began to collect evidence from the scene, but there wasn't much. Judging by the scene, the investigators believed that the child was probably killed somewhere else and was then dumped under the billboard. The billboard was located on a service road adjacent to the interstate, although not immediately or easily accessible from the highway. Judging from the appearance of the child, the police speculated that the kid may have been part of a migrant worker group that came to find work in the local area every harvest. Investigators eventually learned that the skeletal remains did in fact belong to a male child. According to the Doe Network, the boy's estimated date of death was several months prior to him being found, possibly as early as April of 1998. And when I started this, I told you that his body was discovered on September 25th, 1998. The young boy was thought to have been between 9 and 12 years old. He was between 4 foot 7 inches tall and 4 foot 11 inches tall, and he weighed between 50 and 80 pounds. He had dark brown, straight, fine hair that was only 3 to 4 inches long. His eye color was unknown, but it was thought to possibly be brown. The little boy had no dental fillings. He had a slight overbite and had erupting upper canine teeth, which may have been noticeable to others when he smiled or even spoke. The little boy was wearing khaki shorts, white tube socks, white brief underwear, and black and white tennis shoes with very little wear. He wasn't wearing a shirt and none was found in the local area. And he also had $50 in the pocket of his shorts. It was two $20 bills and one $10 bill, which $50 back then is equivalent to $100 today. The clothing was the only clue to the boy's gender when his body was first found, and the boy hadn't reached puberty, which could have caused some changes in bone formation, and his bones were badly decomposing. The autopsy determined that the boy's cause of death was homicide, and the manner of death was strangulation. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the manner of death was inferred by exclusion, since no forms of trauma were visible on the young boy's body. But the mystery remained. Who was this boy? Fingerprints couldn't be obtained, so the little boy's DNA was entered into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC for short. And the crazy thing is that there were no reports of missing children in the area, and no DNA matches were found in the NCMEC database. Investigators gathered promising clues from the boy's clothing and sneakers, discovering that his shoes were purchased at a Walmart around February of 1998. But despite efforts to pinpoint the region where the shoes were sold, they hit another dead end. I think that if this boy were found today, it would likely be simpler to identify which Walmart the items were purchased from. Walmart has outstanding surveillance and an effective purchase tracking system, making it easier to trace his parents or whoever purchased the shoes. Unfortunately, this case took place back in the late 90s. Hitting another dead end, investigators worked with the Secret Service to trace the money discovered in the boy's pocket. However, the serial numbers and absence of fingerprints on the actual money yielded no leads, leading to yet another impasse. The case was featured heavily in the media, and there was a $5,000 reward for information. That's like $10,000 today. Who was this boy? Who was responsible for his death? Investigators chased down every single lead, but they soon ran out of avenues to explore. And within just a few months, the case went cold. Sadly, the child simply became known as the boy under the billboard. However, investigator Tim Horn never gave up. He was less than 2 years into his investigative career when he responded to the scene under the billboard, and he would continue to work on the case for the next 22 years until the day he retired. Investigator Horn was an Orange County native born in a law enforcement family with roots in the area, dating all the way back to the 1760s. His father and great-uncle worked at the Chapel Hill Police Department, and his uncle served at the Carrboro Police Department. Tim knew it was his destiny to work in law enforcement, and he could have had any advantage by joining his father or his great-grandfather's precincts. However, Tim didn't want a handout. He wanted to rely on his own reputation. He wanted his achievements to be his own. So, at the age of 21, he began working at the Orange County Detention Facility and later attended basic law enforcement training. He then served on patrol for about 6 years. In 1997, Horn transitioned to the Criminal Investigations Division as a crime scene investigator, dedicating the next 22 years to the Orange County PD. He expressed no regrets about his career choice, stating, quote, "I've been privileged to do so much in my career that I can't even imagine it would have been better anywhere else," end quote. Horn was one of 6 original members and commander of the tactical team, trained in Homeland Security with nuclear, radiological, chemical weapons, and explosives, and he even attended the National Forensics Academy, a prestigious international forensics academy in Knoxville, Tennessee. At NFA, Horn had the opportunity to study subjects such as crime scene sketching, photography, evidence collection and processing and analysis. He also studied at the Body Farm, an outdoor anthropological research facility at the University of Tennessee. The Body Farm is designed to study how human bodies decompose under various conditions. At the Body Farm, bodies are placed in different settings, such as being buried, submerged in water, or left exposed to the elements to simulate real-world scenarios. This setup allows forensic anthropologists to closely study decomposition rates, which are influenced by factors like time, temperature, and even the growth of roots through skeletal remains. The valuable insights gained from this research are instrumental in enhancing forensic techniques and solving criminal cases. It is evident that during his career, Horn was certainly busy. But guess what? He still devoted time over the next 2 decades working with hundreds of people from multiple agencies determined to learn who the boy under the billboard was and how he ended up in Orange County. Horn followed leads, sent evidence out for testing and retesting, and even examined everything from insects found on the body to bones and teeth, which provided clues about the boy's previous location. Now, this case is crazy because this little boy is a John Doe. Who in their right mind doesn't report a child missing? Well, one of the individuals who helped the investigation tremendously was forensic sculptor Frank Bender. Despite not attending college or studying forensics formally, Bender had an 85% solve rate, and it turned out he relied on his intuition to guide him in recreating the faces of unidentified victims. Frank Bender collaborated with organizations such as the FBI, Scotland Yard, Interpol, and America's Most Wanted. In fact, Bender created a bust of the infamous murderer John List for America's Most Wanted, which eventually led to his capture. A side note, I do have to cover John List's case one day. In 2011, Horn asked Frank Bender to reconstruct a 3D bust of the boy under the billboard. Bender agreed and began the reconstruction of the boy's face. He used the remains as well as DNA results from Paraben Nanolabs, Inc., who developed genetic phenotypes. Phenotypes are the physical representations of genetic materials such as eye color or hair color. And the case of the boy under the billboard was featured in The Man Who Faced Death, a documentary about Frank Bender. It was labeled a documentary investigation in progress because the director wanted to wait for the identification of the boy to be determined before finishing the documentary. Sadly, this would be Frank Bender's last case. He suffered from pleural mesothelioma, an aggressive cancer linked to asbestos exposure during his days in the Navy. Bender passed away that year at the age of 70, and the boy under the billboard was still unidentified. Bender would never learn the boy's name or whether his gut was right on this one. You see, Bender believed the boy was from out of state and was killed by a caretaker, i.e. a family member or even an adoptive parent. Yet, despite extensive national and international media coverage and even a $5,000 reward being offered to identify the boy under the bridge, the little boy remained a John Doe. And then, a little more than 20 years after the boy under the bridge was found, Horn finally got a break.
Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns, and April is Financial Literacy Month, an entire month dedicated to taking control of your money. Because honestly, no one really taught me how to manage money growing up. I didn't learn about investing until I was well into adulthood. But what I love about Acorns is that it makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. I know, April is an entire month, but you don't need an entire month to learn. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified portfolio that matches you and your goals. You can start with just your spare change, and you don't need a lot of time. Setup takes just 5 minutes because I know that your time is precious. And if financial wellness has ever felt out of reach, Acorns makes it simple, giving your money a chance to grow without the overwhelm. Personally, using Acorns gave me the confidence to stop putting it off and just start. And that peace of mind is completely worth it. Sign up now and join over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $25 billion with a B dollars with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/militarymama or download the Acorns app to get started today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/militarymama.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
It was December 26, 2018, which was supposed to be Horn's official last day in the office, a retirement date he had postponed several times. But on this day, Horn received news from Dr. Barbara Ray Renter, a genetic genealogist consultant known for her role in solving the Golden State Killer. Side note, another case that I need to cover soon. Dr. Barbara had discovered a match in the boy's case. Barbara is a genetic genealogist, biologist, and retired patent attorney. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and biochemistry and a PhD in biology. She later earned a law degree focusing on intellectual property law with a specialization in biotechnology inventions. After retiring from her legal career, she pursued genetic genealogy as a hobby, which eventually resulted in significant contributions to criminal investigations across the globe. She is best known for her role in identifying Joseph James DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer by using DNA to trace familial connections. Barbara is now the president and founder of Firebirds Forensics Group, Inc., a corporation that focuses on assisting law enforcement in identifying suspects in violent crimes and identifying unidentified human remains. Barbara is also a search angel with DNAadoption.org, where she helps adoptees find their birth relatives and also offers to teach adoptees how to use their DNA to find birth relatives. And what Dr. Barbara found in this case would be a game changer for the boy under the Billboard case. She discovered that he was a first-generation child of Asian and white parents, and there was a possible first cousin of the child's parents living in Hawaii. That relative returned one of the many calls that Horn made on December 26. And finally, nearly 22 years after responding to that daunting call about human remains underneath a billboard, Horn learned the boy's name. Robert Adam Witt. He went by Bobby. The family member explained that Bobby's relatives in Ohio hadn't reported the young boy missing because they assumed, based on what the boy's father had told them, that the boy's mother had taken the young boy back to her native South Korea. What? After receiving this information, Horn wondered if the boy's mother had also been killed. Horn reached back out to NCMEC, and with their help, Horn identified a case in Spartanburg County involving an unidentified Jane Doe who fit their search criteria. Now, Spartanburg County is not in North Carolina, it's in South Carolina. By utilizing fingerprints and ancestral DNA, along with support from the Korean National Police and Interpol authorities, the authorities identified the Spartanburg Jane Doe as Myung-Yo Cho, who became Myung-Yo Witt after marrying a man named John Russell Witt. Myung Cho was found on May 13, 1998 by a man who was looking for cans on the side of the road near I-85 in Spartanburg, South Carolina. During his search for cans, the man happened upon Myung's body. She was a young Asian woman and her body was found mostly nude, behind a pile of debris off the interstate. According to the Doe Network, the woman was thought to have died only hours earlier. She was estimated to have been between the age of 30 and 45 years old. She was approximately 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighed between 140 and 150 pounds. She had black curly hair and brown eyes. She was wearing light pink nail polish on her fingernails and toenails. She had a small scar on her left forearm and 3 vaccination marks on her upper left arm. She also had 9 missing teeth. She wasn't wearing clothing aside from her underwear and 1 high-heeled shoe. Her clothes were eventually found a week later, roughly a mile from the scene. The woman had ligature marks on her wrists, and an autopsy revealed that she had been suffocated. Her fingerprints and DNA were collected and entered into NamUs, the National Information Clearinghouse and Resource Center for Missing, Unidentified, and Unclaimed Persons across the United States. In an attempt to identify the woman, police talked to people in several local Asian communities. They looked into immigration records and displayed a sketch of the Jane Doe in several nearby towns and cities. But their efforts didn't produce any leads, and the case went cold. There was very little information about Myung's life in my research, but we do know that she was born on January 7, 1954 in South Korea. She met a man named John Russell Witt, who was an American serving in the Korean War. The two married, and then Myung returned to the United States with her husband. The couple was living in Michigan when on January 7, 1988, Myung gave birth to a baby boy she named Bobby. The family then moved from Michigan to Ohio, which is where Bobby grew up. Little Bobby was close to his aunt and cousins who also lived in Ohio. He was especially close with his cousin Natalie. Natalie said Bobby was a precious little boy. He was so kind and he spent a lot of time at her house, and he was the little brother that she always wanted. You see, Natalie came from a family of 3 girls, so it was nice to have a boy around. During the summers, the cousins played air hockey and spent hours and hours playing Nintendo 64. Myung, who was always fun, played Gloria Estefan songs while her and little Bobby danced around the house. Bobby's aunt said that Bobby, quote, was a very brilliant little boy. He was funny. He had a really dry sense of humor. He made her laugh and he was sweet. He was a sweet, sweet, gentle, kind-hearted little boy. Myung was funny and fun. Literally, I'm going to have to say probably the hardest working person that I've ever known in my life, end quote. Natalie was 19 years old when her uncle John broke some surprising and difficult news to the family. Myung had abruptly decided to move back to Korea, and she had taken Bobby with her. It seemed odd to Natalie for Myung to just uproot Bobby and leave without saying goodbye, but they had no reason to doubt John's story. In the years after Bobby and Myung left, Natalie and her sisters often looked for Bobby on Facebook and other social media accounts, hoping that he would one day search for them when he was older. However, any hope of getting in touch with Bobby was swiftly and irreversibly crushed when they learned that Myung and Bobby's body were discovered 2 decades earlier. But nothing could prepare them for the devastating realization that the person that had been lying to them all those years was likely the person that had murdered them and left them on the side of the highway. Myung's very own husband and Bobby's very own father, John Russell Witt.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Ladies, you'll end up shopping for your guy's deodorant, right? So try Degree's Original Cool Rush. You see, last year, Degree changed the formula, and men were mad. One guy even started a petition. So Degree admitted they messed up and brought the Original Cool Rush scent back. It's clean, crisp, and actually smells like someone you want to cuddle. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So toss one in your cart and find out why it's the best-selling men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory.
John Russell Witt was born March 31st, 1962. Like Myung and Bobby, the details of his background aren't widely reported on. His name did appear, however, in the Charlottesville Observer only months after the bodies of his wife and son were found. And it wasn't because he did anything heroic. On January 8th, 1999, the Observer reported that FBI agents had obtained a warrant to arrest John Russell Witt. He was accused of coercing a 60-year-old ATM technician into opening 6 ATM machines and stealing over $100,000. Once located, Witt would face charges of bank larceny and using a handgun during a felony. Concord detectives and FBI agents stated that on December 28, 1998, the ATM tech met Witt in Concord to discuss a business deal. Witt then drove them to a shopping plaza where he allegedly forced the tech at gunpoint to open an ATM to remove the money. The technician, who was employed by Diebold Security to repair ATMs, was familiar with the machines. Witt also was familiar with the machines because he used to repair ATMs for the same company, Diebold, until he was fired that September. I was wondering how people would get this idea. Well, for the following 5 hours, Witt forced the technician to withdraw money from 5 different ATM machines in different locations. After he got what he wanted, Witt dropped the guy off at a gas station and fled. Witt was arrested and charged, and he eventually pled guilty to 6 counts of armed bank robbery and carrying a firearm while committing a crime of violence. It's not clear what the length of his sentence was, but his release date for that crime was 2037. In the year 2000, Witt appealed his convictions and sentence, arguing that the indictments were multiplicious, meaning that the prosecution dissected one crime into multiple offenses to get more prison time. The appellate court ruled there were clearly 6 incidents separated in time. Although it all occurred in one day, there were at least 6 different locations. The court stated that Witt could have easily stopped what he was doing at any time, not only the robbery, but the holding the tech at gunpoint. Each of the larcenies at each of the ATM machines was a separate crime of violence. Therefore, Witt was properly charged with a separate and distinct count in relation to each of the separate bank larcenies. Witt also believed that the 25-year sentence for a, quote, second or subsequent conviction, end quote, was wrong because he pled guilty to both charges at the same trial, or basically at the same time. The government pointed out that Witt lost his chance to argue about the charges being unfair because he didn't bring it up before pleading guilty. Witt tried to argue that he didn't have good legal representation when he pled guilty and that the U.S. shouldn't have charged him in the first place. But the court said, shut up. Kick rocks, your attorney did just fine. Witt's appeals were denied. So, with the deaths of his wife and his child, along with the revelation that Witt might be involved, well, this all left the Witt family in a state of grief and shock. After the bodies of Bobby and Myung were identified, Witt's family released a statement through Witt's sister to NBC that read in part, quote, "It's been absolutely devastating because we didn't know they were missing. It's like we just found out December 26, 2018, that my brother went on a murder spree. Not in a million years would I have ever imagined that my brother would be capable of doing this disgusting, vile, heinous act. Not in a million years would I have imagined him to be a monster hidden in plain sight. Our hearts are broken into a million pieces. We had no idea that Bobby and Myung were no longer with us and had not been for a very long time. It came as a total shock to us when we spoke to Major Horn. Our world fell apart. We don't think we can ever forgive our brother for what he did. Bobby was the sweetest, kindest, and funniest little boy. He always had a smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye. And to think of that being snuffed out brings a chill to our hearts. Our brother told us Bobby's mother Myung took him back to Korea to raise him, and we believed him. Now we need to bring him and his mother home where they belong and bury them next to his grandmother who adored him. We would like to thank the Orange County Sheriff's Department and most especially Major Tim Horn for his 20-plus years of work and never giving up hope and finding Bobby's family. The family would like this time for privacy and to grieve," end quote. To cousin Natalie, who I spoke about earlier, it seemed as if she had just lost the last thread that connected her to Bobby. She said, quote, "Bob was a precious little boy. He was so sweet and kind. The thing I'm going to miss the most is that before we knew this, I always had hope that I would eventually someday find Bobby and Myung on social media or something like that," end quote. As you may have imagined, Witt was not hard to locate 20 years later because he was still serving his sentence for the ATM robberies in a federal penitentiary in Ashland, Kentucky. On May 13, 2019, an Orange County grand jury indicted Witt for the murder of his son Bobby Witt, charging him with first-degree murder and concealment of a death. He would face the same charges for the murder of his wife at a later date. According to Orange County Assistant DA Anna Orr, Witt yapped when confronted with the new charges. Witt said he met Myung while serving in the Air Force in South Korea. They later married and were living in the Concord area when he began an affair. He wanted to pursue the affair relationship with his mistress and planned to move the mistress into the home he shared with his wife and son. Oh my goodness. But there was a big issue. He couldn't do that with Myung around. So his solution was to suffocate her with a towel, wrap her body in a blanket, drive her to South Carolina, and leave her nude body behind a pile of debris off of I-85. Well, John's mistress moved in with him and his son shortly after he killed Myung. It's unclear if the mistress knew what happened, but after being at the house for a bit, not surprisingly, she didn't get along with little Bobby, probably because Bobby was like, "Where's my mom and who is this chick?" Tensions were high in the house between little Bobby and Mistress Lady. which led to many arguments between the new couple. Witt told investigators that he told his mistress that his wife had returned to Korea to be with her family. So when the mistress wasn't getting along with Bobby, the woman suggested, well, why don't you send Bobby to be with his mother? Obviously, this wasn't an option because Myung was no longer among the living. So John Witt decided he needed to murder his only child, 10-year-old Bobby. He made this decision so that he could continue being with his mistress. Witt then took Bobby for a drive and told him they were going to play a game. He asked Bobby to get into the back seat and lie down with his eyes closed. Witt then climbed into the back seat, got on top of Bobby, and suffocated him with a towel. Doesn't this sound like the Chris Watt case? Anyway, Witt later told his mistress, who thought Myung had returned to South Korea, that he had sent little Bobby on an airplane to be with his mother. Witt blamed the murders on his lust and said he still loves and misses his wife and son dearly, saying, quote, "The terrible things that I did do are in complete contrast to how I feel about little Bobby and dear Myung, whom I love and miss beyond words," end quote. This is something that John said in court. Witt said he was, quote, "in heartbroken sorrow," end quote, over the killings and begged forgiveness from his former wife's family. He said he was haunted by their murders and even tried to commit suicide in prison in 2001. Well, the Superior Court judge in handing down his sentence said, quote, "It's hard to even know what to say to you, in part because this is such an inexplicable tragedy, and in part because I get the sense that you're aware of that," end quote. Tim Horn, the investigator, attended the hearing because the resolution of the case was very important to him, having spent most of his 28-year career trying to bring whoever killed the boy to justice. Horn became close with Bobby's extended family through the process, who helped provide information that led the investigation to his father. Horn planned to fill in the family after that day's hearing. John Russell Witt pled guilty on January 15, 2022, to 2 charges of second-degree murder and 2 charges of concealment of death, and he was sentenced to 26 to 32 years for each murder to be served consecutively after he completes his current sentence for robbery in 2037. Witt now resides in the Federal Correction Complex in Butner, North Carolina. Before I end today's case, I want to end with Major Tim Horn. When Bobby's body was finally identified, Horn decided he had to be the one to bring the remains to the family. Bobby's ashes had been in the Orange County Medical Examiner's office for 20 years. Horn remarked, quote, "I had been with this child long before I knew his name. I cared for him, I looked out for his best interests, and I tried to solve his case. Bobby and his mother will soon be home again," end quote. Bobby and Myung's family expressed immense gratitude to Horn and others involved in the investigation. Myung's remains were also returned to the family, and a funeral was held for the mother and son on May 18, 2019. The two were laid to rest together in Mount Orab, Ohio. What a tragic story. And really, this man kills his wife to be with this mistress, then he kills his son, then months later he gets locked up for 4 decades, and where is the mistress now? Cheaters are so obnoxious, like seriously. Anyway, I just want to say I love you all. Thanks for having me in your ears this week. Let's thank the Lord for detectives and badasses like the ones in this story. Shout out to Elizabeth for researching this episode for me. My sources for this case are a couple of appellate court opinions and articles found in WRAL News, The News Observer, The Doe Network, People Magazine, Oxygen, NBC Wisconsin, ABC News, Local 12 News, chapelboro.com, Washington Post, Asheville Citizen Times, Charlotte Observer, Albuquerque Journal, The Herald, and the Daily Mail. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. Executive producers for this episode are Myrtle, Falcon 13, and Jen. Our newest patron associate producers are Lorena and Vicky. Our newest Patreon assistant producers are Kevin, Nicole, and Tito. The theme music was created by Tyops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next week.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.